All right, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Animation Dissection. I'm R. Magnuson, also known as Neeksy, here, of course, with Zorak.
Hi.
And we are going to be talking about the much anticipated and also a little bit controversial series, Kill la Kill, which just wrapped up this week.
Yep, it was a ride at the very least.
It was something. Well, let's introduce the show at least properly. Kill la Kill was made by Studio Trigger, which was founded, I think, in 2011,
Yes.
by former Gainax employees.
Yeah, it's basically all the really major and really popular employees from Gainax who had recently worked on things like Gurren Lagann, for example. In fact, the
Yes.
director and writer for Gurren Lagann and I believe it's also the director and writer for Panty and Stocking went over. So basically, all the the recent production from Gainax that weren't really kind of dull or boring moved in that direction over to Trigger, and Gainax has kind of suffered ever since.
Yeah, and the writer and director in question, the director being Hiroyuki Imaishi and Kazuki Nakashima. So they were both people who had worked on Gurren Lagann, and that was exactly why people were so excited about this upcoming series. I mean, when this stuff was posted online, everybody was just on pins and needles about it.
Well, yeah, and Imaishi is just a huge name in general for his animation style. He's got a very unique style, and he's got a really interesting approach to key animation and just the dynamics of things. I mean, he's done key animation on tons and tons of things, and a lot of them were actually pretty good. Gurren Lagann is an example. He did Re Cutie Honey. I believe he did some work on. I actually don't think it was the actual. It was actually on the original Evangelion, though obviously it doesn't have a lot of his style in it. But
He
he did
did
that.
an episode of Fooly Cooly as well, and then he also had his film Dead Leaves.
Yes. Well, he also did a lot of help, I believe, for Redline, for
Hmm.
example, which has certain sequences that you can really tell are in fact him and not, Koike. He's done just tons and tons of stuff, and he's just got this really neat style. He's what
It's
you would cons-
recognizable.
he's a very when you consider one of like the auteurs of the Japanese animation industry, alongside people like just like
Yeah.
many. There's certain art, there's
Well,
certain
like
directors who are like
Yuasa or Yo-Yo Shinari and all
yes,
these other big names, that have really become a lot more popular lately as the West has gotten more familiar with who's behind these productions.
correct, yeah.
So, and I think that recognizability and style is definitely one of those things that brought people to be interested a lot in Kill la Kill. So,
And
well, let's
certainly
get
also the fact that basically just like the anime that they did work on last, Gurren Lagann and Panty and Stocking, were pretty much two of the most popular anime released in Japan that were viewed by people in the West simply just because it was like so crazy to people in the West. Like, oh my gosh, we love this. They made a huge cultural impact. It's kind of like how Attack on Titan is making a huge impact right now over here, where everybody just cannot shut up about it. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, then they also had the Little Witch Academia, which was very popular, and they actually were able to go to Kickstarter, and they got something like either almost like $500,000 to produce the second episode, and that was definitely advertised towards Western audiences to participate in this. So,
Yeah, because
just
the
so
first
having
one
just
was
before this,
yeah,
they
because
got a lot of press.
the first episode was one of the Anime Mirai Anime Future projects that was sponsored by the Japanese government as like a
Hmm.
sponsorship of the cultural arts, where every year they sponsor like four studios and give them a certain set amount of production money to produce this single one-off episode or one-off kind of special about just a certain show, and it's resulted in a lot of really interesting shows over the past few years. The one that everybody freaked out about last time, prior to Little Witch Academia last year, was the Wasire no Gumo, I believe it was called. The one with the spider kid.
I'm trying to. I think it's just slipped my mind, but in general, it's been a really nice project that gets a lot of younger animators involved in the process. And there's actually a making of for Little Witch Academia up on YouTube, so you can actually see it's like about like an hour long little mini documentary. and you can kind of also see the production issues they were having on that one. So, well, speaking of production, well, let's take a look at Kill la Kill in terms of visual style. So, one of the things I noticed kind of immediately when I was looking at it is that um, I'm not sure what the budget was for this show, but I don't think it was all that high. But not to say that I think the visuals were bad by any means, but I think it was very apparent that they were working within limits.
See, I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I wonder if they actually had a decent bit of money, but they simply could not get enough animators in. Because
Mm.
I mean, I've heard some people talk, and obviously you can't really trust it that much. But I've heard some people who are relatively well informed state that Aniplex was really pushing Kill la Kill as a big thing that they wanted to produce. But it looks like they really just had issues getting people in. I mean, just to actually just to draw on it. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why they had to take a 2 week break in the middle of the production, where they skipped, two of the episodes of the normal two cores that this ended up being. So it ended up
Yeah.
being 24 total episodes. I honestly think it was just that they had so much of an issue getting staff in. And I don't know if that's a overall scheduling issue with there being so much, new series coming out both this spring and, last fall/winter, or they just didn't get enough staff hired on for Trigger prior
It,
to airing, or what?
it might have been a lot of things. I mean, again, this last year, it's almost like there's been this huge explosion
Yeah,
in all these productions. I mean,
it's like how it was used to be in the mid 2000s for a while there, where you'd get tons and tons, and it exploded for a while in the mid 2000s, where you were getting like in like spring season, we were getting like 60 to 70 series in the spring season, and then it went down again after the market kind of crashed, particularly the anime production market, even prior to the housing market.
yeah.
And then basically they just had an issue trying to actually sell the stuff, and then it's been ramping up again, and this year we're back actually to mid 2000s levels, which is insane.
Yeah. Well, I think distribution helped a lot in that, in the sense that now you do have like, because well, people were in the U.S. at least for the nice thing is ancillary markets can make up a lot of money,
Yeah.
and you don't have to do that much effort to sell your product off. Once you sell it, it's not like you're responsible for the distribution anymore. Now it's whoever you sold the rights to.
Yeah, I
And
wonder how much of an
that used
impact.
to be DVD sales, ADV, and all those other companies. That's all collapsed because people don't view that stuff by buying tons of DVDs. It's online streaming, and now that they can actually make money from the online streaming and all that, it's I think put a little bit more money back into the budgets again. So
Well, also I think part of that is the fact that DVD pricing for a while there was absurd for anime. It was it was Japanese style
yes,
pricing where they were trying to sell, a single
120
series,
bucks
yeah,
for
for 26 episodes or something, or which is
yeah,
even cheaper than it is in Japan, mind you. But the entire reason they did it is that they were pricing it so Japanese customers
collectors.
couldn't repurchase it from the West and bring it over. So basically, it was so much cheaper in the U.S. It was actually cheaper to import it and just watch it without subtitle. Without the English dub or whatever.
Hmm.
It was cheaper to do that. So a lot of that was actually an issue that they saw in the early 2000s for a while there. So it
Yeah.
resulted in them pushing up the licensing costs, which resulted in the push up of the DVD costs and a stipulation of what the DVD costs had to be. But things have been getting somewhat more reasonable over the last few years. So. And
Yeah.
of course, the fact that they can, there's the realization that streaming can offset, the costs, or offset the licensing costs, and then there's also the thing that like Crunchyroll, they're actually
Yes.
licensing series out just for streaming, and then DVD rights can be bought by someone else, which
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
which is strange but interesting.
Yeah. Well, Aniplex, I think, for Kill la Kill especially, they did the rights for both the physical productions and the streaming, and then it was Crunchyroll that got from Aniplex the streaming for the Western audiences.
Yeah, I believe so.
So that was still either way, money coming back to the system. And I think maybe they just had trouble staffing. But either way, let's say they had at least enough of a budget to work with. I think Imaishi has never really been about fluidity. I mean, even back in Gurren Lagann, the animation was never exactly fluid. It's kind of it's jerky, but not in a subpar way. It's
It's
always
style. It
been
feels really stylized in terms of the jerkiness. Well, that's something you even see with like Little Witch Academia is that it'll have these moments that are really smooth. On the other hand, it also does a lot of the corner cutting that are that are
But
very stylized.
that was not Imaishi though. That was Yo-Yo Shinari, which is I think why that one had some more moments.
Didn't he work on it though?
I think he helped with it, but I think the primary animation director was Yo-Yo Shinari,
I think you're
and
right,
that's
actually,
why
yeah.
I think there was a bit more smoothness going on there, and you have a little bit more what I call follow through. You
Yeah,
know,
I
you
think
have
I
the hair
misremembered.
whipping and following in inertia. Imaishi likes to do a lot of stuff with very high energy keys. You know, he does these almost like JoJo-esque poses that are very outrageous and all that, and he uses swooping camera angles and very kind of, and also for comedic effect, he kind of uses that jerkiness. And I think he kind of embraced that a little bit visually for the humor. You know, he kind of suddenly turns it into super limited animation or very tweened animation that looks like it's a paper cutout that was kind of computer moved very smoothly like a computer animated thing. So
Yeah,
like,
particularly with the characters Mako and Harime Nui.
yeah,
Those two,
exactly.
especially to like with Nui, it was actually to the point of actually being like a in-universe mechanic essentially that she made no sense animation-wise, and that was kind
Yeah.
of her ability essentially, so to speak, is that in
She
fighting
could just tween herself outside of the blast radius or anything like that. It was,
yeah,
you
exactly,
know,
or
and I think that was intentional to some degree. But at some point, I think after a while, I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, it's taking the kind of idea of being low budget, and it almost got a little bit to the indulgent side, at least for me.
yeah, it picked up as time went on. I found like the last few episodes looked nuts. Like they
Yeah.
looked
Well,
really good.
I think they were. Well, those ones were really delayed. I mean, they were delivering them like right at the deadline. So like there
Well,
was almost like a 12 to 24 hour delay for some of these things on the Aniplex site.
oh
So
yeah, that's part of the reason why there was the streaming issues because they were having issues of getting the subtitles on it. You know, they
well,
had to have the
yeah.
delay to actually get it going, and so
Well,
they were able to
period.
get it out of the door in the Japanese airing. But then the U.S. release had to be delayed because they had no time to get it ready.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't get there's nothing for them to time the subtitles to.
Yep.
So I mean, I remember looking at Twitter on for the last episode being released. Like they were like, "Wait, we just finished the episode 6 hours ago." I'm like, "That's like less than 12 hours before your official showing time." Holy crap!
Well, that I don't know. That's actually impressive when you think about it because it looks real great for this.
Oh
For
yeah,
looks. And you have to keep in mind also like it's very. It often gets a lot worse than that. I mean, with Attack on Titan, they had the issue that they were seeing occurrences where different networks actually aired different versions of episodes because because the production the deadline for certain networks was slightly different. So they were
yeah,
actually running people out over to these different networks as they were, just before their deadline, with whatever was done at the time.
yeah.
So it got a little absurd with Attack on Titan. Like that, I think is like the worst it gets short of actually missing the deadline.
Oh, true.
I mean,
So, I mean, at least it was that level. But I mean, it seemed like especially they were just kind of plagued by production issues, at least to some degree. Not disastrously so, but a few.
yeah, it certainly seemed like it. I mean, people had really high hopes going into this in terms of the overall production style. Like everybody, well, what was the joke that everybody had for the fall that it was going to be, like
Sakuga Fall.
yeah, Sakuga fall because like all these super great Sakuga series were going to come out. I can't even remember what all the series were in hindsight. It turned out like the most Sakuga series were the ones people really didn't expect to be that interesting in terms of the overall animation quality. The point was kind of stupid. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even remember the name of the one series that everybody was like, wow, the animation of this is incredible. Why did they even bother to put this much, money into this?
Effort into it, yeah.
It's kind of like, it's not that interesting of a series, but it's really well animated.
Well, it's like a lot of the Kyoto animation, series. Like they have some very good animation people.
Oh, they
behind them,
they are Sakuga as shit.
but like they choose these very milk toast series to do it behind. So
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
just,
yeah, it's just that's the way they do it. So
yeah,
but
to explain to everybody what Sakuga actually, seeing as we just said
well,
that
Sakuga. I mean,
it's an informal term people use that isn't entirely accurate. It means just like fluid animation, I believe, or fluid motion.
no, it just means like the original drawings
Oh,
for as in it's actually being drawn.
Okay, it's used to mean fluid motion, though.
Yeah, it is. It's used to mean, but the literal meaning is like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, you're looking at someone's original, the pencil animation they've actually put the effort into and things like that. That's
It's used to
considered
refer to
suckbound.
really to what most people just consider key animation. So
Yeah, or just animation, like hand drawing it.
but in terms of what they actually need in terms of the within the industry is that it refers to key animation, actual the key frames, the ones that they actually take the time between, not like in betweening and it's basically sequences or shows. Basically, it's used to describe shows that have, a lot of keyframing, a lot of really dynamism going on.
Auteur animation, essentially.
Sure,
like
essentially.
Space Dandy, for example.
Oh, Space Dandy's a perfect example of that.
Yes.
And people expected Kill la Kill. I mean, I expected Kill la Kill to have a lot of that. Part of that was coming off of Little Witch Academia being just completely nuts in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, there were sequences in there. You're just looking at the individual frames on it. It's like, this is fucking great. And then Kill la Kill, everybody's kind of at first is like, oh, they're just cutting corners, with, like the first episode. It's like, there was really good sequences in it, but then there was these bits of cutting corners. It's like, oh, that's just so they can enable to do the, the really dynamic bits. And it keeps on going. It's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, they started getting less and less. It was like at first they did a couple really great sequences, and then it just really dipped for quite a while. And then at the end, they kind of, ramped it up a little bit.
Yeah, like the first few episodes, I mean, like the third episode had that really huge, like, fight scene, for example. But even with that, they ended up using CG for a lot of the fighting, and it's like, they did that again later on, but they usually covered it up better. There's parts in, like, the third episode where you could really tell that they used 3D models, and it's like, no, this does not look very good. There was bits that looked good in the third episode, but it was kind of just like, But in general, they just seemed like they had lots of issues getting enough staff on to do the quality of animation they wanted.
Yeah,
and the quality of animation people really expected.
Yeah, some of the in-betweens, whenever I look back at certain clips, I see a lot of bad growing and shrinking problems and things like that. So like there's some issues in there. But again, when you look at Imaishi's work, he's not really even about the good in-betweens. He is entirely about strong keys and breakdowns, at least.
Yes,
that's pretty much what he does. And for television animation, that's really useful, I think, because you are often working under tight deadlines, especially with the Japanese industry, very tight deadlines. So, I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, I think if you become over-reliant on that, it gets a little bit indulgent.
It also really fits his directorial style in general, that he is very much about these big key moments, these very dynamic scenes, and he's basically just trying to find ways to get to said scenes, really. I mean, that's basically just kind of his directorial style in terms of, how he works with, you see that particularly with his working with Nakashima's writing. You have these really crazy moments, and he's building up towards these moments, and he's just trying to hit as many of these moments as possible, where, like, basically the cool pose, or, the really
It's almost a little
visual.
bit Michael Bay in certain ways, where it's a bit
it does
more,
feel like that.
It's like explosions everywhere!
I mean, stylistically, it was a very interesting series in general. I mean, some of the art decisions are, weird, but there is a lot of neat stylistic decisions, like the whole association with the Honoji Academy, with everything being covered in spikes, or the decision to have the overlaying of like logos on top of everything, like naming everything, or like when people say really important phrases, they'll scroll down the script. And obviously, it's a way for them to save on animation for one, but for two, it looked cool as shit, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's also taking certain genre conventions and just completely running with them into a fucking wall in front of everybody. I mean, that was kind of the point of it.
And of course, they also did it for comedic effect, where you could see it reflected in like people's like reflected in sunglasses and shit. Like, what is
as
it's
if
actually
it was really there? Yeah,
yeah, I know.
It was that was the time I think where I think the humor worked the best for me when it was doing that kind of genre parody.
Honestly, I think we're getting slightly ahead of. So I think in general, the way the style and the amount of animation they had for this, it really did work best in the sense of, okay, this is a comedy, and that's really what the series worked best in terms of was the comedic aspects. Like, yeah, it has really nice action
comedy,
sequences.
I think.
Yeah, as an action comedy. When it tried getting a bit towards the melodramatic side, it didn't really work because, then you have this goofy animation that doesn't really match up with, some of the, like, oh, they're trying to make it heavy right now. This series does not feel heavy at all because you've been feeding us this animation style that does not really match with it whatsoever.
Yeah, I think this is also why Kyoto Animation does this type of stuff that they do, because they focus a lot on character acting and kind of small little animation movement. They're able to kind of take these dramatic scenes with talking and conversation and emotional depth, and they're able to work with that. Imaishi style is extremely useful when you want to do intense fighting or shonen energy or explosions, things like that. But once you force him to have to deal with characters having emotional depth or a big dramatic moment like that, that's not related to physical action, well, at least not overt physical action, he really struggles.
See, I don't know if that's the case because he's done a lot of stuff that actually does handle that well. Like Gurren Lagann had some really heavy sequences that worked a lot better than say Kill la Kill's did. The thing is that Gurren Lagann also had like a million studios and tons and tons of money being funneled into it.
Yeah, and so they might have been able to get animators.
I honestly think it was.
He wasn't. I don't think he animated every single episode of that.
No, but he directed it though.
Yeah.
Well, he obviously didn't animate all of it, and they had a lot of. I don't think he animated everything in Kill la Kill by any means either.
Oh, true, yeah.
But I mean, it's just more that he can direct that very well, and obviously the director style does influence the style of all the sub animators, and sub directors quite heavily because it informs a lot of the style of the overall work, but. He can do it. I just don't think he really had the money to do it. And the amount of things that he did to do the corner cutting early on did not help when he was trying to do things, later on.
Yeah.
And there were certain decisions, particularly with writing, moving a bit in that direction, that didn't really help a lot in that regard either.
Yeah. Well, let's actually get into the second half of what we're going to go through. So, the plot
may I do the premise?
And and also the more controversial elements that kind of feed into the rest of it. So, the overall story of Kill la Kill.
I want to do it.
Okay, go ahead. Let's leave this one to Zorak then.
So, Kill la Kill is essentially the idea that this girl whose father was strangely murdered in front of her goes to this academy, Honoji Academy, where she believes that her father's murderer can be found after receiving a letter from a teacher there. She goes there, discovers that it's full of teens with magical superpower clothing, with using mysterious things called life fibers to power them up, having this oppressive school regime that is very overtly compared to, like fascism and whatnot. And it opens up with basically her seeing like the corpse of a student, hanging above her, though that's retconned later.
Yeah.
And basically finding herself trying to find who killed her dad. And ultimately then she finds that her dad was a scientist who made this super powered talking piece of clothing that when activated becomes like a really skimpy outfit. And she gets involved in this overlong plot that involves ultimately, spoilers, teaming up with the people at that academy to fight her evil mother. Essentially,
yeah.
Spoilers.
Okay, that's it in short. So it is the Honnoji Gakuen, the academy there, and apparently, well, let's get. I mean, people who are listening to this have probably already at least somewhat seen the story. Is headed up by another student named Kiryuin Satsuki. And so she's the one that is assumed for quite a bit of the series to have been the one that killed the dad, and that's the main conflict there. And she's running this academy, pretty much, I think, accurately like a fascist regime as a way of trying to build up this army to eventually attack her own mom, who has been...
For the longest time, we didn't know that. We thought she was just trying to take over the world. And it turns like, oh no, she wants to stop her mother from taking over the world. Oh no. And that is one of the weird things, is that they build up early on that she is basically a fascist, and they build up how much of a jerk, essentially, everybody running this academy is. And then they even have, in the first episode, someone getting murdered.
Yes,
but then
outrightly. Even some of the characters, the cronies that are, the let's say that, what is it, the tennis club and the boxing club person, or at least the boxing club person, I thought they died. Like they
No.
show when he gets flung, he's defrocked and then flown, and you see him land in a bunch of spikes and a whole bunch of blood squirts out, and then the camera pulls away. I was like, oh, I'm guessing he's dead because I figured the show treated death fairly lightly, considering they already straight up murdered a student.
But no. Then everybody that we thought was killed was just heavily critically injured. Basically, I don't know how much of that was them changing the overall plot as it went on. That is one.
It feels like that because, like, not only did the people who were defeated by our main character, they were also apparently demoted and were not allowed to have the powerful uniforms again. Like that was apparently what the rule was: is if you get defeated by this outsider, then you're not worth it, and I'll just toss you aside. And then they all come back, and I'm like, it seemed like a character turn to kind of justify, or at least maybe whitewash, like the horrible system that this character had put into place.
I think it's personally had the view that they look like they kind of changed their mind halfway about what they wanted to do with the plot. Like,
yeah,
that was something that was actually was leaked essentially, that they were originally going to have it more episodic fighting, but then they just basically had Ryuko, the protagonist, essentially fight everybody at once, essentially, and just get it done all at once.
Yeah.
So they could move on to this more overarching plot. So I wonder if that was, them basically saying, oh, we like, one of the best parts of this show really is that the extended cast is actually really fun, and they're really fun characters.
Yeah.
And basically, I think that was them realizing, like, hey, we really like this cast, and we really like what we're doing here. We actually like the antagonists a bit more. We like the just the subcast in general. We want to do more with them. I wonder if it's just that, and they basically realize, like, oh, hey, we want to keep going with that.
Yeah, well, like the main character, I find her very boring. I don't find her I mean, her personality is kind of like she is kind of like Gurren Lagann the person.
See,
Her personality for me is defined mostly by being coarse and angry, and I really can't think of anything deeper to her behavior that kind of reflects
they did
that.
devote an episode or two early on where so basically she cares about the family and adopting her essentially when she gets into Honoji town, the
Mankan-shoku, yeah.
The family basically takes her in, and basically there's a whole thing with her friendship with Mako Mankan-shoku, who's really the comedic central part of the entire show.
Yeah.
They were kind of actually the core of the entire show. When you get it, without her, the show would be kind of dull and boring.
Yeah.
And basically, it's her interactions with her, and she cares about her friends and her adopted family, and she wants to have a normal life. And they had an episode there that really kind of accentuated their interactions and their friendship. But beyond that, they didn't really do all that much with her character until towards the end, essentially.
Well, they did that once, and then they just dropped it, and so it didn't feel like that affected her behavior all that much.
Yeah,
they used it to go like, here's some backstory. Oh, so is that insight to that backstory going to kind of lead up to helping us understand her personality and actions? Well, not really until the very. I mean, it felt like they kind of just dropped it in favor of these sub characters, and I like the sub characters a lot because their interactions were a lot more funny and a lot more interesting, and each of them got backstory as well.
Referring heavily here to the Elite Four who serve under Satsuki, as well as the the wonderful people who work for the secret organization fighting against them at Nudist Beach.
Yeah.
And in general, I think that's part of the issue is that they didn't devote enough time to just Ryuko just working and interacting with the Elite Four enough. Other than I'm angry and I'm going to fight you. Let me fight Satsuki. They didn't give enough beyond that. One easy thing to make a comparison between Kill la Kill in our series is Revolutionary Girl Utena, which had a very similar framework of, hey, I'm going to fight this student council, or rather it was kind of flipped in the other direction when the student council wanted to fight her. But it had a lot of the same sort of things where they had this extended cast that's really fun, and a really good extended cast in general. But they had a lot more interactions, and they spent a lot more time developing the protagonist and why she has her personality and other aspects to her personality than just, hey, I'm going to fight you. Don't you bully around, my friend, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, again, that's what I was saying. I feel that they didn't really do much with Ryuko. Like
Yeah.
I felt that her personality was too easily contained with shonen spirit, essentially, and essentially that's actually how she wins in the end. Like when I first saw the final episode, I thought, oh, I'm watching Gurren Lagann.
Yeah, it was
You know,
very
like
heavily that. Like,
it was extremely. I mean, you know, she uses the power of the spiral
well,
essentially,
yeah, she ends up basically. Well, one of the big things with this series is that it's just an endless series of plot ass pulls,
and
where
power ups.
yeah,
Yeah.
anytime an antagonist gets beaten about something, oh, they'll pull something out of their ass, like, oh, I
You
actually can
thought
also
you
do this.
defeated me, but haha, you're not.
And then the protagonist does that constantly. There's never really much in the way of like dynamic growth where like, oh, I see what's happening here. Oh, she learned from this or she developed this thing. It doesn't feel like there's a sense of accomplishment to it. It's just kind of like, oh, it is
They
time
just
for me to
needed it
assume
here.
this mode.
Yeah.
And I think this is tied to the whole thing with Imaishi where he really feels with the plot that or rather with Nakashima that he's writing the plot so that Imaishi can have these certain scenes. Because one of the things with the plot of this is that they have lots of times where Ryoko kind of goes not I don't she kind of well the joke everybody uses with the fighting theme is that she loses her way.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
she has lots of scenes where she's just like, oh, I'm going. Let's just go over them. Like we have the one where she goes berserk.
Yeah.
She has
And
the thing where she decides not to fight and just stops fighting entirely, and her clothing gets cut up. Then she has to get it back, and then she has a thing where she says, "Oh, I'm not going to fight the ultimate enemies because I don't want to put my shirt friend through that." Then there's the whole thing with her going literally evil.
oh yeah.
Oh wait,
Getting
no, sorry, I
brainwashed.
skipped one.
Oh yeah.
She doesn't want to put her shirt friend through it, but then she does do it. Then she gets beaten up, and then she learns that she can fight on her own without it, and she refuses to wear her shirt friend anymore because she's a monster. I am made out of clothing, and she just decides to fight on her. Then she goes evil, and it's like you've done this entire thing with the turning away from the main plot 7 times now. This is ridiculous. You can do this once or twice, but you did it again and again and again and again, like multiple episodes in a row. There's like a stream of it. The entire middle part of the show has this happen again and again. It's like,
Well,
okay,
the character is learning a lesson and then unlearning the lesson because they need to keep on doing these kind of conflicts.
I don't know if it's just the conflicts or they couldn't think of something right, or again that because these all resulted in interesting visual scenes. Like you had the thing with like Ryoko without wearing her kamui senketsu, where she cuts off everything in half. It's like really dynamic, like whoa. Or
Yeah.
and the whole thing with her going berserk, it's like whoa. Or the thing with her going evil, it's like whoa, this looks cool. And it's basically him and Nakashima just finding these visuals and scenes he wanted to do, and just kind of doing whatever he can to move to these neat visuals. Like this would look cool. I want us to do this, and it's like okay. We're gonna do this, and it's kind of like, but it doesn't build up on everything we've done until now.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Well,
It doesn't feel
it's
emotionally like it's visually interesting, but it doesn't have a lot of emotional weight because it kind of after a point, it's kind of like, this again.
Yeah, I mean, he's writing for the purpose of visual dynamism and not because it's good writing.
No.
And that's I think one of the big issues. And let's also look at the other big issues in terms of feminism, women, and rape culture. This show has quite a few problems, especially even in the first episode, and for quite a while in the beginning. There is there's some problematic aspects. So
we could even start with the very fact that it's basically they're half naked the entire time. It's presented as a joke, but it clearly it's aimed at the otaku audience essentially. That it's like, oh, our audience is all male. Let's just make everything fan service.
And not only that, I think one of the big issues is that the character. It's like it's one thing to have a female character dress up in a certain way, maybe skimpily, if it's their own volition. But in this show, especially in the beginning, it is not her own volition. I mean, in the first episode, she is pretty much assaulted by the uniform, which tears her clothing off and then puts himself on her. all the while she struggles against it, which raises quite a few allegories that are much less pleasant to think about. And
Yeah.
even then, she is embarrassed by her own clothing when because her the when she gets into that super suit mode, there's like camel toe, and during the transformation sequence, you see it basically push these cloth bands up into her vagina, basically, and she's embarrassed about it, and she makes note about it, and then you see all these scenes of all the male characters cheering it on and peeping at her. I mean, the family she stays with is constantly trying to watch her bathe. I mean, again, and the fact that she treats this like her new family adds some other kind of creepy angles to it. But I mean, there's all sorts of this kind of hot-blooded male gazy type of aspect to it that is, I think, it's trying to play it off as a joke. But considering all these other elements around it visually and the character's reluctance to wear this type of clothing and is very much not okay with this.
Well, the thing is that
It's
it's really this is a really cultural trope, though. I mean, people made a lot of comparisons with this and like comedic anime by Go Nagai, who he's done lots of sort of stuff where it's kind of like the perverted comedy essentially is what it's going for. It's going for this perverted sort of feel. It's a pervert comedy where it's aimed at a male audience specifically, and it's supposed to be mildly titillating, and that's the joke. I mean, this has been around since the mid '70s,
Oh, I'm not saying
and
that this
it's
is
not really
unusual,
different from like
but
that respect.
something about it, I think, it's easier to forgive a series like that when it's kind of very open about its proclivities. Essentially, I feel that with Kill la Kill, it was kind of trying to have its cake and eat it too. It was trying really hard to. It's like we're gonna have all this kind of nudity, and we're gonna have all this kind of lowbrow humor in here, but we're gonna also try really hard to justify why. Like they really
Well,
want it to be
I
like, what we're doing is not really that bad because see, there's a reason that she has to wear it and it has to be skimpy because of the surface area of the clothing. Like I think trying to justify it oddly made it
I
a
don't know
little
if
bit
that's I don't
harder.
know if that like those explanations always seemed to me like joking. Like there's an in-universe reason why that's the case, but it's goofy. Like
Yeah.
it's so like goofy. Like they're literally fighting using sentient clothes, or like it's really goofy, and like they're space alien clothes from outer space. It's like
Yeah.
the entire core concept is goofy as hell. I find it hard to take their in-universe reasoning for, oh, this is why her outfit is skimpy. That like, oh, they're trying to justify it and make it seem like, oh no, this is okay, see, because it's plot. It's clearly something made up after the fact, and it's not really treated as like super serious. And more to the point, I would think, in terms of like them doing things that don't make a lot of sense and kind of go against the comedic aspect, is the weird bad touch stuff.
Well, that's what I mean. So we well, let's address this.
But yeah.
There is incest and or at least incestual aspects to this show, especially when it comes to Satsuki and her mother in a really kind of disturbing scene that's not
Several disturbing scenes, in fact.
several, actually quite a few several disturbing scenes, and actually also happens to Ryuko as well, where the mother essentially molests her daughters as a way of indoctrinating them into this kind of cult of life fibers, essentially, and it's extremely creepy and extremely, I think, unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, you'll have a antagonistic character do certain acts as a way of saying like, well, this is how bad this person is, or this is how disturbing their thought process is. And I think already, considering like what the mother is planning and what has she has already done, that's already kind of enough to say that this character is the bad guy that we want to
And they dwelled
attack.
so much on it, and they did it multiple
Mm-hmm.
times. It's like it's
It
very
got
clear
creepy.
that it's basically them being perverts making this, which I don't think they would deny, and I don't think is a surprise given what the rest of the series is. But it really does feel like creepily unnecessary completely. Like even I don't think it's really going out there just to say like they really did not need those scenes at all. And the odd thing is that by the end, we still have no idea why the villain was so villainous. I mean, she did these horrible things and did this creepy bad touch stuff. But at the same time, it's like we have no idea about her as a character beyond, boo, I'm cackling evil. It's like, you could have used those scenes instead to, explain why she's like this. What is her motivation? Why did she become so evil? Why the hell does she have life fibers in her first place?
Well, again, that would require nuance, and I think that's just not really what the show was kind of going for, even though it hints at that a little bit. I mean, every once in a while, it's like, oh, I kind of want to look back into this a bit more. I mean, I think Satsuki ends up being the one with the most nuance because you get a whole bunch of flashbacks to her past and how she was recruiting her eventual friends and
why she turned, why
and her experience with her own mother and why she grew up the way she did versus her father. She ends up actually being I think also one of the strongest characters because she builds herself up entirely by her own effort and is not. The reason she's powerful is not her clothing or not the fact that she has life fibers inside of her or anything like that. It's kind of like the Batman-Superman debate, Batman's such a cool character because he built himself up. Okay, to be fair, he's rich, but, let's...
Well, she's also rich, so it's very
she's also rich, yeah. So she is basically the Batman figure, but I think that's what oddly makes her more compelling in a lot of ways, Batman, is that she's not, she can't rely on the power of the spiral or, just being lucky entirely of why she's so powerful. But again, the show sometimes seems to be wanting to have this kind of nuance, to have this kind of emotional journey, and it seems to want, especially with the ending confrontation with the mother, it really seems to want to have a lot of gravitas and emotional points being cashed in when the mother bursts her own heart and just fades away. And I'm like, well, I don't really care because this whole time she seemingly was just brainwashed. Her entire motivation is, well, our family have been keepers of this thing for ages and brainwashed.
It's the nature of the world. We got to do it. And it's kind of like, but why do you feel this? You never get a good hold of her entire motivation. It other than boo, I'm evil. We've been doing this. I'm going to do this. Oh, you're trying to stop me from doing this? Tough shit, You never really get a hold, at the end, it's why are you killing yourself? Is that really the best approach here? It just feels abrupt.
Well, I think she ended up just becoming a stand-in for the life fiber core. I think it's like she's because
but they could have easily made a character that is literally that if they wanted to.
Well, no, again, they could have, but I think that's the role that the writer ended up giving her was to be the voice of this antagonistic alien parasite force that normally does not have a voice. They should, I think they should have just given it a voice.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the issues in general, with one of the writing aspects is that they focus so heavily on the clothes and the fact that these are space alien clothing, fibers that are intelligent to some degree. And they give one that actually has, they specifically say, oh, he's part human now, with Senketsu, but they never have him interact with anybody in the cast really for 20 episodes.
They kind of do for a little bit in the end. I think Mako, Satsuki, and but again, not enough to make it interesting.
Well, because they literally write that he can't until they see him moving around. The character interact with him oh, he looks like he's probably sad right now, and then in the very final episode, oh, I can hear what you're saying. Okay, time for you to die.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's oh, that was so abrupt and completely pointless.
Yeah, well, they also, at the same time, I understand why they couldn't keep him around in terms of just, well, what is exactly their relationship, and also, how does that work with the rest of this kind of cleansed world and letting Ryuko kind of move on with her life after that.
I don't know if they had to have done that approach that they did where they killed off Senketsu at the end.
No, they didn't have to kill him off, but I think that was because having him around the same way things were before this incident would not have worked. Their solution, instead of kind of coming up with a more nuanced one, was we're just going to have him sacrifice himself for her, essentially.
Well, and also it was an attempt
that was their way of doing.
It was also obviously an attempt at emotional gravitas, which it's kind of oh, Senketsu died.
Well, then they also tried to work it in as the act itself being a symbolic thing of graduation and puberty, and I think there's an episode that they're working on now as a OVA, which is literally I think titled, or at least in the previews, it was about graduating.
See,
You know,
I
I
think
think
it
it's
works
called
better.
Goodbye Again, and throughout the whole thing, you know, they're talking up the idea of, oh, we're graduating. But
See,
again, I
I
don't
think
think
it
that
works.
was good.
I think
I think that was thrown in there at the last minute, and I don't think the show thematically was about that by any means.
see, I
But
think
I
it
saw
works.
them attempting to shove that in there as a theme.
See, I think it works better as that in that respect. Like, because the whole things of the joking around the structure of the school was actually the like some of the funnier bits. Like the whole thing with them going on the like the raid trip,
Oh yeah, I
or
really
like
wish the show was more about the school.
because they did some really funny stuff with like this being like Hitler school. They
And
did a
they're
lot
still
of.
going to classes despite all this crap. Like, what is it? She sets like anybody who defeats her, gets to move up. She still has to attend classes there as like a normal person while this is happening. And so like, and there was kind of like a fun thing going. I mean, I kind of wish there was a bit more done with the school, and
Yep.
I think if the writer was able to be a bit more creative with the different clubs and their powers and how they tried to defeat her. I think the issue
Well,
was it was going to get. I think that at the same time, looking at the way this was going, I think it was going to get boring and repetitive because I think they really struggled to come up with different ways of cornering Ryuko and coming up with interesting strategies. It's not like JoJo where the fights are kind of like puzzles in an interesting way. They all started becoming very much just about brute force.
well, yeah, I think that was one of the poor aspects of the writing, and I think that's partially because a lot of it's driven by the fact that they made Ryuko just such a boring character, but then
Yeah.
they also made Senketsu, her partner while fighting, also very boring because he doesn't really contribute much like early on, even with like fighting stuff. Like he is there and he's how she can fight, but like their interactions for like the first few episodes really, or well for much of the show is basically like, hey, you should fight better, or hey, be more careful while fighting. And that's literally all the interactions with Senketsu are for like a good half the show.
Well, he's kind of like a glorified mascot character, or like if you look at Sailor Moon, like Luna the cat, like just really not seemingly necessary to give like a couple explanations for things, but it becomes very irrelevant very quickly, or at
See,
least doesn't really offer all that much.
I think one of the better things that they could have done with this is that if they made Senketsu able to talk to other people, yeah, they wouldn't be able to do some of the gags that they did, or like, yeah, they couldn't use like, oh, her bond with Senketsu is so good because they can communicate. Like
Yeah.
if they actually had it so that he could interact with other characters and gave him more of like a personality beyond just, hey,
Please
I'm
wear me. Yeah.
please wear me. I want to protect you. Also, I want to drink your blood. That sort of thing. If they did more to him beyond that, like, what if he had, like, what if for some reason,
Autonomy of some sort.
or yeah, some sort of autonomy or some other interest? Like, what if they made it like so he had like a hobby or something?
Yeah, I mean, again, small, cute character moments would have been fun.
Oh yeah,
And
like or like any sort of
but
thing.
you don't, but you get those not with the main duo. All those cute little character moments are for everybody else in the show.
Yeah,
Like
that's the
the
weirdest
Elite
thing.
Four, the way those guys interact with each other, you get cute little moments. Gamagori, I think, ends up being one of the most interesting of them in a
Well,
lot of ways,
all of
especially
them
with
except for Inamuta are really interesting. Even
yeah,
Inamuta is kind of interesting in that he's such a smartass for no real reason. But
yeah.
like the
Well,
entire
well, you have to have a straight man character. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's
and,
what
he,
I
and he
mean.
is the joking straight man in the sense that he is so straight that it's that you cut yourself on him essentially.
Yeah.
And then
So
also they do all the goofy visual moments with all him being like references to like all the different like nerd culture stuff with like he also like Metal Gear Solid references and
oh
whatnot. And
yeah, I forgot about those.
I mean that's the weird thing. Like they really the extended cast. And the really actually the best part of the show that I would think most people would agree was the character writing for the ensemble cast, but not enough time is really given for them to shine and interact with the main character.
No.
The two main
Well,
characters. I mean, like Mako is a huge driving part of the entire show and why it's actually really fun. That her and the Elite Four and her interactions with the Elite Four and Satsuki are probably like the best parts of the show, honestly.
oh, pretty much. I mean, and again, I think that would have. I think if the show was able to kind of contain itself to the school a little bit more readily before going global the way it did, I think that would have allowed for a lot of those kind of smaller moments and those types of things to build up. I mean, I think a good example of doing something kind of like that would be both Utena and Star Driver.
Yeah.
Like you spend a lot of time with both the protagonists and the antagonist. You really get to understand them very well, and you kind of root for both of them on some emotional level. And you know that one of them does have to win over the other, and that kind of creates emotional conflict, and I think gives a lot of better payout. You get a big payoff for these emotional moments,
And
and
the
I
interesting
think
thing, one of the interesting things here is that we're talking favorably at Utena, but even Utena was kind of not a super dynamic character either. She was a means to the end until you learned her final motivations, and she was so much better than Ryoko was, really.
yeah. And well, again, like I mean, I feel that I think Utena was more about everybody else.
Yeah.
And but again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you look at Shakespeare plays, a lot of people really aren't interested in the main characters, and it's the side characters that people often remember the most. And I think that's perfectly fine. Sometimes sometimes really dynamic and really funny and crazy characters, it's really hard to have them carry a narrative. It's a lot. It's a lot that they're not able to really handle.
See,
But again, at the same time, you can't then make the main character extremely bland. Like the typical male protagonist in a light novel or one of those harem anime where it's boring to the main character is so boring to the point where they are. Why are they there?
yeah.
it's. I mean, so there is it's a balancing act. And I think it's fine to have the side characters kind of be more interesting than the main character, but you can't. That doesn't mean that the main character can be boring and have really ununderstandable motivations. I think it's a balancing act, and I think this one really struggled with it because she just feels like a generic shonen main character who's hot-blooded anger, and the way she talks is very kind of this rough and rowdy tomboy style in her accent and her speech and everything else.
She's supposed to be kind of I think what they're going for is that she was supposed to be like a bad boy, kind of like a Yankee type style person, or a punk.
And that's about it. Like, and she doesn't really seem to.
She's a punk who cares about her friends and family and wish she knew her dad. That's basically all you have to there. And they don't even devote enough time to that, really, to give you a feel like that's a major part of her character.
Yeah. They allude to it a little bit, like, in her flashback of essentially having been sent off to school, and then she eventually started having, trouble and fighting people. But you don't actually see any of that. Like, they don't devote enough time to figure out, well, why is she fighting these people? Other than, well, she started becoming, this roughneck kid. That's about it. Like, there's no time to show her emotional journey as a kid or why her estrangement from her dad, made her the way she was. Because it seemed like for a while she didn't even really like her dad at that point, but she suddenly was really attached to finding out who killed him, etc.
Well, I think part of the issue really with it is that they could have, if they had a few more episodes, they really could have actually, or, repurposed a few episodes. I think that they could have really taken the framework and, like, not remove any of the major episodes that they already have. I think they could have really made Senketsu and Ryuko much more interesting characters if they just gave some episodes just for them to just shine on the character aspects. Things like the one that they did early on with the family getting rich and and losing touch.
Oh yeah.
if they did more of those, like say with her interacting with the Elite Four, like for example, more like the interaction episode that was just with her hanging out with Gamagori for a while. Like that was a great sequence.
Yeah.
If that was longer and more there, I think it would be a lot more interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
say one little weird plot thing I found weird is that they had that whole sequence in the middle with the Honoji Gakuen fighting those other schools, like with their raid trip.
Oh yeah, that was great.
It was a great sequence. It was really funny and interesting. A lot of good gags in it, but it was so pointless for the overall narrative.
Yeah.
It added nothing.
No.
In fact, in order to build up to it, it just was like. It completely screams the whole thing I was talking about, where it felt like they had these ideas and they really wanted to do them, and they just needed to find a way to do it, and they couldn't be bothered to, like, I don't know if it can't be bothered, but like they didn't have
a cool-headed editor to sit there and say,
no,
hey,
we need to
that's
do this
a really
smarter.
fun idea, but it's like, in comedy, it's the idea of, sometimes you have to kill your baby. It's like, oh, you really love this joke, it's so awesome, but it's going to derail the plot, or it's just not going to work here. It might be really funny, really great, but you have to make that choice to make the greater whole work better and not stick that in there just
It
because you really like it. It feels like in this case they're like, we're just going to put in whatever we like, and sometimes that can be fun, but at the same time you're going to get some holes. You're going to get a bunch of pacing issues when you have that.
Yeah, it feels like the comedic portions of it and like the serious like narrative portions of it often are fighting against each other.
Yeah.
And like some of these visuals and characters that they like the whole thing like so it feels like it's really fighting with itself because like they devote so much time also like say to like the Elite Four getting like new uniforms and making a big deal, and they have like almost no impact whatsoever other than a few things here and there that is like, oh, look how cool they are, and it's like, yeah, they're cool. I really wish you could have them
and
do
then
something.
the gag is that they're tossed away suddenly because even that upgrade pales in comparison to the power of this new antagonist. Like they were just being elevated for the sake of showing how powerful this person was. Like that ended up being
I don't know
a
if that
gag
was what they were
that
doing.
completely undercut everything.
See, I don't know if that's what they were doing so much as that they built focus on it because like everybody likes these characters like the Elite Four, but then they feel like they need to have Ryuko be the one that does much of that actually beats the final villain, and they again have these visuals, like these ideas in mind of how the villain needs to be beaten. Like they just want to have like the final fight. They have the ultimate threat beaten like 5 different times. It feels like a freaking RPG where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, they defeated the ultimate life fiber.
Now
with
my ultimate final form with wings in space.
yeah, because like they defeat the life fiber, then they defeat the antenna that was going to be used to broadcast the life fiber after the life fiber comes back to life. But then she uses her special outfit to do the stuff anyways and turn everybody off, or I'm misordering this.
Well, she impales herself on the thing to then take control of everything, and
it's like they literally like 5 different times that it's beaten until it finally takes, and then like it's the Elite Four are only relevant for like 2 of those, but it ultimately feels like, okay, so you just really wanted to give Ryoko a chance to shine, and you couldn't think of any different threats to really work this up or to draw it out more. You just needed, because you wanted to have these visual things of wham, bam, oh, it is beaten.
Yeah.
And it also feels like one of the issues also with the writings that they kind of ran out of antagonists for a while.
Or at least they ran out of good ones. I mean, they kept on trying to introduce random ones, like the that one security girl that had the glasses and tried to trick
she was
them,
built. She was set up like in like episode like 8 or something. But the thing is, like they ran out of ones used, so they used her as like a filler thing to like oh, because she's plugged into my suit, I can control everybody. Oh, you knocked her out, and it's like, what did she matter? Why was she important?
Yeah, well,
who the hell was she?
Like, well, and the like, what the hell was the motivations behind Harime Nui?
Well, with
what
her,
was her deal? Like, I mean, apart from the fact that she, was able to somehow use the powers of tween animation to get out of everything, and that she's kind of similar to Ryuko.
She's literally insane was the whole thing that they were trying to make her out, basically.
And that's what drives me crazy. It's the same thing with the mother and the assistant. I don't know what the hell the deal is with that character.
We had no idea what it was. We don't know if she was actually like an alien, like if she was life fibers. Because there was a thing early on where she gets cut in half and then immediately shows up again, and supposedly is able to somehow stop the Elite Four, though we don't see how. She just shows up so Satsuki can get beaten up.
Yeah.
And that's literally it. It's like, what the fuck was her deal?
And again, so like the thing is like, so these villains, because it's almost like they go, oh dang, we made the Elite Four so likable and interesting that we can't really make them the villains anymore. So now we have to make new villains, and we're just not going to develop them, so we don't make it difficult to have to kill them off or something. I mean, it's like, it's almost like they purposely just decided not to develop the final antagonist.
I don't know if it's not. I don't know if because
I
get the feeling that like the bad touch stuff. I think beyond the whole like, oh, it's in there for fan service, which is really just fucking.
Well, that's fucked up. Yeah.
Fucked up fan service, mind you. Yeah, but it's also there to try to make the antagonist an antagonist. Like they're doing both at the same time, I think. But the thing is that there are much better ways to do that, because even after that, we still have no idea what her deal is. It's so pointless. Yeah. Like, they want us to hate these characters, and they do make you hate Nui in the sense that she shows up repeatedly just fucking shit up.
Yeah.
They do make you dislike her in that sense. Like, she's always there to just mess with things, but you never get a real idea of her motivations other than, boo, I'm evil.
Yeah, and that really, again, it makes for it to have no emotional payoff when she sacrifices her body or when the mother kills herself. Essentially, there's no. It's like, well, that happened.
Well, yeah, the
I
same
mean,
thing even
that's
with
as much as you feel about it.
even same thing with like Senketsu, where it's kind of like, oh, I guess Senketsu died. Well, yeah, I
That
guess
happened
that was
again.
happened.
That
Yeah,
that happened.
it's like he wasn't defined enough to really care that much. I mean, yeah, he was the friend, and he did get more like developed later on. But after that, a while, it's kind of just like, The fact that he didn't interact with anyone other than Ryoko basically means like he might as well have just been made up. Like
Yeah.
it all in her head. It didn't really matter. It didn't really add much, and it didn't, especially because the best part of this entire story in this entire series was the ancillary cast interacting with each other. And then they have characters that don't interact with the rest of the ancillary cast. Like even with Ragyo, like the mother, she doesn't interact with the rest of the cast other than a few times. And when she does interact with them, it's funny and interesting. You're kind of like, oh, that's cool. She's talking with Shakazure. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. It's like if they did more moments of the entire cast, just because there's so many
Well, it's to
weird
show
characters in the
it's
cast.
relationships. That's the thing. Is like there's no sense of relationships between these
Yeah,
characters. And,
and,
it's, and again, when I say relationships, I'm not talking about like, oh, who's going to pair up with Hugh. It's like, no, the nature of drama or the nature even of humor is the relationships of characters with each other.
and it worked best from the comedic aspect that they did have there, but it didn't really hold up the drama aspect all that well, except for when it related to Satsuki, to be honest,
Yeah,
who was frankly the best defined character and the most developed
interesting.
character in
Yeah,
terms of the arc. It's just she really would have probably been a better protagonist, really.
yeah,
I mean, you needed a Ryoko, but if the writing was better, it would have worked better.
yeah. Well, so I guess we kind of have a sense of our conclusions here. So like there's aspects to the visuals that I thought were very successful in terms of dynamism and color and certain things of design I liked. Although of course there's really problematic design issues when it comes to these outfits and things like that. I think writing wise, the show kind of it had some good character moments, but they weren't the main characters. It was entirely the side characters, and those side characters are often kind of brushed away at times. That makes me really miss them, as opposed to, you know, needing to exit the stage for the sake of the plot. It didn't really work. I mean, I kind of give this show almost like a C. It's like it was good, not great. It wasn't horrible, but at the same time, I understand why a lot of people had a lot of problems with it. I mean, a lot of my female friends were very much put off by some of the kind of the rape and incest allegory aspects to it.
Yeah.
And these are friends though who liked Utena, which also has
Oh
it's
yeah.
not it's not the fact that it contained the content, but it was the manner in which it was portrayed and the kind of the male gazy aspects where the audience is kind of assumed male and therefore we're going to kind of present it in a sexualized sense rather than as a narrative sense that these things are happening.
Yeah, Utena was actually more fucked up in in the sexual sense in terms of character actions, but at the same time, it felt less like pervy.
Yeah, again, well, that's the aspect of male gaze is that it's
Yeah.
not the content, it's the manner in which you're being told to read the content.
Hmm.
Like you're supposed to look at it and go, "Oh, yeah, this is hot," versus like, "Oh, that's fucked up."
Yeah.
You could show someone the same subject matter, but it's about the intent of that subject matter. And I feel with this one, it, I think it tried to do this a little bit deceitfully. I think it tried to both have that fan service thing and then it walks around a little bit trying to say, well, no, we're justifying it, but not really. So
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it very problematic. So again, I think it's a ride. It has certain aspects to it that are good, but there are undeniably very problematic aspects to it. So I completely understand why some people are very angry at the show, and I don't blame them for that by any means.
Personally, I found it enjoyable to watch ultimately, and I thought it was a really good ride, as you said. It really was the characters that made it so good, and the visual scenes. Like Imaishi, he was going for those dynamic moments, but you have to admit those were some pretty cool ass dynamic moments when they did happen. But they
Yeah.
kind of just lacked a lot of the emotional weight that really made me care. Like by comparison to like Gurren Lagann, which he previously worked on, Gurren Lagann really made you have a lot of emotional investment in those big moments when they did occur. It didn't make it. It didn't feel so.
Cheap.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was just having these scenes occur again and again and again and just going straight for the scene for the sake of this looks cool. It felt like you were actually it balanced the emotional weight of them and the overall drive for the overall plot much better. And I suppose I should be fair that this is a lot of with Nakashima, a lot of this that's kind of his style. And he also did the writing for Gurren Lagann as well, but I guess he just did a much more concrete work writing there. There was a lot of issues with this. I found things I didn't care for. Certainly, the creepy moments of the bad touch really put a bad taste in my mouth, and
Yeah.
I was willing to look past it. Those, to be honest, personally, maybe just because I've seen so much anime at this point, and I do enjoy a lot of actually Go Nagai stuff, which has a lot of those sort of scenes. Something this has been really compared to, for example, is Re Cutie Honey, the Cutie Honey remake, which is also done by
Ooh.
Imaishi and has a similar sort of comedic style, and is actually really funny, even though it is also extremely perverted. But the ultimate like crime I find with this work is just that it's so mediocrely written. It's just so dull and hard to care about a lot of it. Like the core characters aren't developed enough. Ryuko and Senketsu just aren't all that interesting. Like, yeah, it's great that her arc finally kind of wraps up at the end, I guess, but it's kind of like they do so much stuff that feels so lazy with them. And they could have done so much more, especially since they had these great aspects, the ancillary cast, but they didn't pull up and use that for the rest of the cast as well. They took those little bits that were so great, and used it for everything else. It'd be fantastic. It'd be an amazing anime. But instead, it just is a entertaining anime that was a great ride. I would probably give it something like a C plus or a B minus. Really, worth a watch. I suppose if you really want to and you're willing to put up with those troublesome aspects, but it's not something that says like you need to go watch this. It's like, if you want to watch it, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's okay. It's got some highs, but it's also got a lot of mediocre stuff and some occasional lows.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So that was Kill La Kill. So I guess we can also go down to some recommendations of things to check out so that we're not entirely negative or too positive either way. So there's two movies that are kind of getting more wide release right now that you might want to check out. There is Hayao Miyazaki's The Wind Rises, which is getting a much more widespread release. I've seen some ads on TV for it now, so definitely that's probably something to check out. And then also another film that is getting a little bit more of a wider release is this French animated movie called Ernest et Celine, which is really cutely animated. It's traditionally animated, so it's nice to see that still going on. And I think it was also up for nominations at the Oscars, so
I've never even
definitely
heard of that
something.
one.
Yeah, it took a while to get it over here. So
Hmm.
knowledge of it has been online for quite a while, and it was in the French market, but it's only just recently gotten a release over here. So it's something to maybe check out. And any recommendations on your side?
Well, lately I've been finally getting around to watching Bob's Burgers and been quite enjoying it. So I would say that's an obvious one to watch. That's airing currently on U.S. television. I believe it's fourth season's airing right now.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm quite enjoying it. As a anime recommendation or something that's actually finished, seeing as how we compared against it so often this episode, I would recommend checking out Revolutionary Girl Utena. It has a pretty decent, I believe, U.S. release. I believe they separated it by the individual sub arcs, and if I understand it, they're not too expensive, and it's really worth checking out. It's a shoujo series intended for girls, but it's a really interesting one, particularly with visually, and the narrative format is unique.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion for a series for a lot of people. And there's also so many series that kind of either reference to it or borrow from it that it's a nice show for foundation for kind of looking at a lot of the anime that you see nowadays as well. I think a lot of series learned from that.
It's also a very good example of the whole thing with people going on about Madoka being, oh, this is magical girl, but dark. Like, yo, check this out. Here's a magical girl anime for girls that's really, really fucked up at times.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I think that's a good suggestion. So, well, thank you all for hanging with us and our reviews, and we'll have a new episode up soon. So, uh, keep watching.